Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather next week, 10 days. In today's video, I'm just going to take us into the second week of February. We may be starting to see some signs of colder weather coming up for next week. It's a long way off. I've been here a few times this winter with the models trying to build high pressure over Scandinavia, get winds into the east, and as we know, it's generally been a failure with the cold air tending to be going down into the southeast of Europe and the ridge just sitting across the north and the west of Europe. So we have had these hints on and off through the winter of easterly winds. I suppose the difference this time is that we've got the stratospheric warming going on, which in theory should weaken the zonal westerlies and dampen down the polar vortex, which it may do it enough to allow this high pressure to really get going over Scandinavia. But it's a very long way off. Not all the models are in agreement by any means. So a lot of caution is going to be needed on it at this stage. But I'll bring you up to date with the latest in a second. Before I get on with that, just to say about the ads. So there's links to articles on all of the pages. You have a browse widget to click through the links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you're going to be helping us to pay for our website. And thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads at most of the pages. They open up with content and if you can give those a watch, as I say, you will be helping to pay for gaswebbies.com. Big thank you to everybody for doing that. Just start with stratosphere. We won't have as much about the stratosphere today. So the stratospheric warming is still going on. It's reduced a little bit compared to where it was yesterday. This is where we was yesterday with this stratospheric warming. This is where we are right now. So it has come down ever so slightly, temperature at 10 HPA. I think that will probably tick up a bit more, though, in the next couple of days. And overall, it's going to stay at this pretty high level throughout. This is a significant stratospheric warming. But again, I think we're falling just short of an official sudden stratospheric warming. We're probably not going to get a reversal of the zonal westerlies and turn them easterly in terms of the stratosphere over the North Pole. So again, no real change. That's why I'm not going to talk about it too much for this video, actually, because everything has been said about it, really. The stratospheric warming has occurred. It's still going on at 10 HPA. There's been no real change at 30 HPA, lower down. And as I say, it is a significant stratospheric warming, certainly at 10 HPA. But we're probably not going to have an official sudden stratospheric warming where we reverse the zonal winds in the stratosphere. So no change at the moment. Stratospheric warming is still going on. Now, the Arctic oscillation, it may be starting to reflect this stratospheric warming. I think we are beginning to see signs of some negativity. The Arctic oscillation is an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole. It isn't driving anything, it just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. When the Arctic oscillation is negative, it tells you that over the North Pole we've got high pressure, we've got northern blocking. When the Arctic oscillation is positive, it tells you that you've got low pressure over the North Pole, and consequently through the mid-latitudes, particularly through the Atlantic and Europe, you're normally strengthening the winds off the Atlantic westerly winds. So back into the autumn through October and November, generally negative with the Arctic oscillation, and that was associated with quite a cold month, actually, in November. That was our last colder than average month. And going through here, of course, as well. We got to the 1st of December, which is just here, and then the Arctic oscillation goes very positive. And it's been positive really through the winter. At no point since the 1st of December have we gone negative with the Arctic oscillation, not in terms of the trend anyway. Round New Year we did get down to neutral, but overall the black line staying in positive territory. So that's why we had a mild temper. January has been a little bit colder. Now the red lines at the end, these are the Arctic oscillation forecast from the GFS ensemble members. Now you can see that several members of the GFS ensembles are going into negative territory. We're not seeing signs of a plunge in the Arctic oscillation yet. We're not going down to extreme negative levels, but certainly returning to neutral. And well, it's about a 50-50 split, I think, between the members that are going negative and the members that are staying slightly positive to neutral. But it does look like there is a very definite reduction in the Arctic oscillation coming up over the next week or two. And this is telling us that we've probably got some high pressure beginning to try and get going around the North Pole. And that's probably associated with the stratospheric warming that we've got taking place right now. No sign of a response from the Arctic, from the North Atlantic oscillation, I should say. So again, this chart, very similar idea. We've got the black line, which is telling us where the North Atlantic oscillation has been, going right way back into the autumn, just here, and the red lines at the end, where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the the North Atlantic oscillation to go. So again, we see the red lines at the end, which are the GFS ensemble members. Most of them are staying positive, in positive territory through into the middle part of February. This could be a problem if we want to get a high pressure going over Scandinavia and get the wind into the east. If a North Atlantic oscillation stays positive like that, we're going to struggle to get easterly winds. I can tell you that right now. We will really struggle to get easterly winds if we don't have the North Atlantic oscillation going negative. Again, remember, this isn't driving anything, it's just reflecting what the atmosphere is doing. But when the North Atlantic oscillation is positive like this, it tells you that the Azores high is there around the Azores, around Spain, Portugal, and so you're going to have low pressure around Iceland, and the gradient between the two, the high pressure in the Azores, the low pressure around Iceland, are going to pick up the westerlies. They're going to strengthen the westerly winds, especially when the Arctic oscillation is negative. And that means any high pressure that tries to get going over Scandinavia is typically going to be pushed down into Central and Southeastern Europe. So before I was to get anywhere near confident about easterly winds, I really would want to see the North Atlantic oscillation going negative, maybe even more so than the Arctic oscillation to some degree. So a lot of caution is going to be needed on this chance of easterly winds later next week. These are the height anomaly flow charts for the next week to 10 days. We've got the ECMWF here on the top. The GFS, we'll have a look at that in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet, is an area in the atmosphere with high pressure, low pressure, being drowned by a jet stream running above. But it extrapolates to low pressure and red to high pressure. So the ECMWF has low pressure out in the Atlantic. There it is, quite a deep trough through there. And I say this takes us to around the 10th of February. Also got this big ridge here to the east and northeast of us. However, it's the Atlantic that's driving things here with the jet stream. That ridge isn't quite close enough to be bringing winds into the east. It's certainly trying to do that, and it's not far off. But as it is with the ECMWF, it is the Atlantic that is in the ascendancy up to 10 days away. The GFS though puts the Scandinavian high in the ascendancy. So we have the trough in the Atlantic looking a lot weaker, and then we've got this ridge here up to the northeast of us, and yes, that would be pulling in the winds. That would be pulling the winds into the east, drawing cold air in off the continent in 10 days' time. That's quite a classic looking scenario for a Scandinavian type high pressure. These are the GFS temperature ensembles and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average, milder than average at the moment. We drop down close to average over the weekend into the start of next week. It's this period just here, which is sort of later next week, that is the period where we might start to bring in those easterly winds. So we can see we have got a few members of the GFS ensembles which are going cold, a couple there dipping down into the freezer, including the operational run of the GFS, which I'm going to show you in a moment. That's this thick green line. These are outlier members, though. They are not supported by the general trend of the GFS ensembles, which the general trend of the ensemble is up here and still keeping things relatively mild. So there's a chance of a cold easterly wind coming up later next week, but you will want to see many more ensemble members, and certainly the ensemble mean, which is the white line just here. You will want to see all of those beginning to dip down into negative territory before you started to get interested by the easterly flow. So it's a possibility, but no more than that at this stage. Precipitation isn't looking quite as alarming today as it has been doing over the past few days. Certainly the next week is going to have a lot of rain coming up, and that's particularly so as we go into the weekend, at the end of the week and into the weekend, I think. But after that, we do have a drying trend here from around the start of the second week of February onwards. Yes, we have got a drying trend coming through there. So it looks drier for the second week of February, but still wet in the first week. Temperature anomalies are coming out milder than average over the weekend. Any easterly that does develop will be beyond this period from the 31st of January through to the 8th of February. Precipitation anomalies are coming out wetter than average as well, so mild and wet for the next week. Here's the GFS for Saturday then. Low pressure is over the country and it looks very unsettled wet. Notice the heights are already rising up to the northeast. We're looking rather flabby at this stage, but we've got low pressure in the Atlantic, and that is in the driving seat, bringing lots of unsettled weather through the country into next weekend. This one on Sunday could bring some very wet and potentially even a little bit stormy type conditions into the south. So it will be a case of watching this space over the next few days in terms of the rain situation at the end of the week and into weekend. Early next week, look at this, but GFS is building that high pressure up over Scandinavia. It's going to around 1,040 millibars. It's already, even at the start of next week, trying to get the winds into the east. However, low pressure still looking quite vigorous in the Atlantic. So at this point, any easterly is certainly going to be struggling. And so to Tuesday next week, we're still keeping the low pressure in the Atlantic in the driving seat. The high pressure is there over Scandinavia. It's up to 1,045 millibars, but we're still more or less just in an Atlantic flow. However, the middle and latter stages of next week, we finally ease off the Atlantic. This high pressure over Scandinavia starts to take over. So by Thursday next week, 9th of February, the winds are going into the east, starting to draw bitterly cold air in from central parts of Europe. By the time you get to the end of next week, we are firmly in an easterly wind, and say that will be a bitterly cold easterly wind as well. And then things get very interesting for the weekend after that. This is just beyond day 10, but this is Saturday 11th of February, where we're trying to bring the Atlantic up against that cold air. So that is well, that's a snow event, I think, for many parts of the country around that weekend of 11th, 12th of February, but that's a very long way off. Our air temperatures show that we're still mild through the early part of next week. There's a warm pizza slice of mild air there across the country. You notice cold air is over the eastern side of Europe, and as that Scandinavian high takes over the pattern through next week, that bitterly cold air is brought into west of Europe via those easterly winds. So by the end of next week, we do look very cold there, bitterly cold, and certainly would be cold enough for snow. But again, I have to emphasise, this is only a very low, or if we take the GFS ensembles at face value anyway, this is only a very low probability. ECMWF showing low pressure racing in off the Atlantic at weekend, so it looks wet, windy and unsettled. Through the start of next week, again, we're trying to build that high pressure over Scandinavia. Low pressure up to Tuesday is still driving in off the Atlantic. We saw on the height anomaly that the ECMWF is less certain with the chance of easterly winds. So actually through next week, what the ECM does is just keeps low pressure driving in off the Atlantic. Yes, the high pressure is there across Scandinavia, but it isn't turning winds into the east. It's the low pressure in the Atlantic that remains in control along with the jet stream. That's probably, if the North Atlantic oscillation is staying positive, that's probably a more likely scenario. That high pressure over Scandinavia will struggle unless we start to ease off that ridge in the Atlantic. And then finally the GEM, so we're driving low pressure in off the Atlantic again through the weekend, looking very unsettled indeed. Early next week, there's the high pressure building up over Scandinavia, very significant looking ridge getting going up there, trying to get winds into the east even as early as Monday next week. Low pressure coming in across the country through Tuesday, wet and windy, and then we go through to Wednesday where that low pressure is starting to slip away from the south. The high pressure over Scandinavia is beginning to get wind into the east, so colder air starting to move in from the continent into the second half of next week, then we firmly get into a proper Scandinavian high. And that does look, out of all the output this morning, that looks really cold actually. It's quite a strong easterly wind, probably driving in a fair amount of snow showers into the eastern part of the country from this very large ridge that's up over Scandinavia. So the possibility is there to turn things a lot colder next week. But at the moment, I think it's only a low risk because we haven't got the ECMWF on board. We haven't got the GFS ensembles on board, particularly just a few cold outlier members. So we're going to have to wait and see where this is all going. As I say, through this winter, we have had several periods where it looked like we might get the ridge over Scandinavia and get wind into the east, but in the end all of the cold air and easterly winds was forced down into the southeast of Europe, taking bitterly cold air into Greece, Turkey and the Balkans. And that might be what happens again. It certainly can't be ruled out that that is what's going to happen again next week, with another big cold plunge going into the southeast of Europe. The only difference this time is the stratospheric warming that we've been talking about so much over the past few weeks might be enough to reduce the polar vortex and the westerlies to enough of a degree to allow that high pressure to get going. And once you get the high pressure in over Scandinavia, it can be very hard to get out of it, but the key with it is always to get it in place in the first place, if you see what I mean, because that's always the hardest time when things can go very drastically wrong, as they have been doing throughout this winter, when we've seen the possibility of building a high pressure up over Scandinavia, getting the wind into the east. It's all gone wrong, and that is always the problem. But once you get the high pressure over Scandinavia and you get the wind into the east, they can last quite a long time and prove to be very stubborn. So watch this space. It's getting really interesting, and we'll see where things are going later on. I might have a look at the GFS ensemble, see if there's any more support for those easterly options as we go through into next week. So that will be with you this evening. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.